To bring in Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers has been with us throughout the night, as well as Judith Miller. And Steve, the question to you, now that you know that authorities there in Manchester are saying that they believe that this is the work of one man who died at the scene, and they are in fact treating this as a terrorist incident. What happens now with that information?
All right, when he says one man who died at the scene, there was one man at the scene who probably transported himself there, and there are no accomplices at that scene. It goes back to the question as to who this individual is and what associates may he have had involved in this. Someone had to build that bomb. If this is indeed an ISIS attack, there was a bomb maker somewhere. They usually send low-level operatives into these venues and into these targets to kill themselves. So he's right. All right, there was one man on the scene who detonated that bomb, but I'm still not convinced that no one else was involved, at least outside the perimeter of that particular venue.
And Steve, if in fact this person, this suicide bomber, somehow had been traced by authorities, that he had been on their watch list, if you will, are there forensics from his body that they perhaps could collect to find out who he is and then work back from there?
Oh, yes, that's absolutely right. That's why the crime scene is very, very important. There's going to be, again, fragments from the bomb, but more importantly, there are going to be fragments from his body. There's going to be pieces of flesh. They're going to have the ability to do some DNA testing, and if he was in fact on their radar, they're going to identify him rather quickly.
Judith Miller is here as well, and Judy, you've been covering this story throughout the evening along with us here, and you have been raising this as a very much a problem with immigration.
Well, it could be. I mean, we don't, the answer to that question depends on whether or not this is a lone wolf attack, the kind of attacks that we've been seeing more and more of, that is inspired by rather than directed by ISIS or a jihadi group. And we won't know that until, as Steve says, we know whether or not he had accomplices in this task and this mission. But the population of Manchester is disproportionately high in terms of the Muslim population. It's roughly 1 in 20 for all of Britain, but in Manchester it's it went up from 9 to 15%, and this community has had usually cordial but sometimes tense relations with the law enforcement authorities. In general, Britain has a very mixed reaction to its Muslim population. For example, the mayor of London is a Muslim and very proud of it and speaks openly about these issues. So many of the people who are the 800 who went to Syria or Iraq to fight, half of whom are believed to have returned to Britain, they will be the focus of law enforcement inquiry rather than the Muslim population writ large. It's very important to keep that in mind. What the British law enforcement and intelligence will concentrate on now are those who have the direct contact with and experience with fighting in jihad.
And I'm glad you pointed that out, because we don't know who this suicide bomber is, and we are not going to condemn anyone. And even with the facts that you presented, I know, Judith Miller, that you were not at all implying that all Muslims in the Muslim population are bad people. I know
no,
that's
quite the opposite.
Exactly. So I just want to make sure that that is very clear. Steve, thoughts from you as you watched that press conference and you heard those words from the local authorities there saying that we believe this is the work of one man. You don't seem to be convinced.
No, I'm not. Again, it's the work of one man on the scene, but boy, Judith brings up a good point that when you have a population of Muslims that were overseas fighting with ISIS and then they come back, what are the chances that this individual acted alone? So I'm still not convinced. I believe it's too early in the investigation to draw that conclusion. I hope he's right, but my experience is telling me that there may be more people involved in this.
And Arthel, I think we will know much more about that, as Steve suggests, once we know the composition of the bomb, because the sophistication of the device will tell us a lot about whether or not one man acted alone.
And also the location where he detonated the bomb, where he blew himself up, and thus unfortunately killing many people along with him. He didn't go inside the arena. He was outside the arena near the train station, the Victoria station near the Manchester Arena, so he didn't have to go through the metal detectives.
Well, what's important, and that's an important point, those videos surrounding that entire area are going to tell a lot. I'm kind of curious about, I'm sure they're going to look at every single vehicle in that parking lot, and there are probably a few thousand there. So that video footage is going to reveal a lot also.
Okay, and we are going to ask Judith Miller and Steve Rogers to stand by for us.